I'm here. It's all about data and assessment. And then it's going to be between me and Mr. Malloy, who is our Key Stage 4 academic coordinator. So it's lots to do with the both of us. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with some kind of base level knowledge. I'm not presuming any knowledge. Some of you will be new to Hastings, some of you won't be, that's fine. So I just want to go through like what grades are on the report. It's not very exciting, but they're going to come home in on the 22nd of December, and I think it's important that you know what they are. Sorry, there's quite a lot of text, isn't it? So we have the ATL grade, which is an attitude to learning grade. It refers to the general preparedness of students for learning. Are they completing their homework? Are they bringing correct equipment? So if they're number 1, it means they always are fulfilling all of the above things. They have a positive attitude in class. They always work their hardest. They're always very prepared. If they're a 2, then they're good. Like they usually do all those things. I'd say most students are a 2 most of the time. You know, we can't be perfect. A 2 is good. A 3, then they sometimes fulfill the above. So they're not. They definitely could be more prepared for their learning and have a better attitude towards their learning. And then 4 is rarely fulfills. So 4 is kind of where, you know, we need to be a little bit worried about 4s. Then we have the PTL grade, which is participation in target language. And the reason we have that grade is because obviously some lessons are in English, some lessons are in Spanish, French lessons are in French. And so students need to be speaking in the language in which they are meant to be. So again, it's number 1 is almost always speaking in the target language. So 1 is like great, 2 is good, 3 sometimes. And so again, like if there are 3, then they need to work on their participation in the correct language. And number 4 is rarely. So again, like they need to be speaking in their target language more. Whatever that language may be. You have the current attainment grade as well, which will go home on the 22nd. And I know for year 10, this will be the first like grade that isn't attitude to learning or participation in target language to go home. So from this is the grade that the student is currently working at, and I've underlined currently because it is important. So from the start of the IGCSE course, year 10, students are measured by the same criteria that they'll be used to measure at the end of year 11. But obviously we expect them to get better from the beginning of year 10 to the end of year 11. So because of this, it's really normal for students to see a decrease in the current attainment grades at the beginning of year 10. We expect, however, that over the GCSE course, so from year 10 to year 11, they improve their knowledge, they improve their exam skills, and this means that their grades should increase from the first reports, provided they work hard. They still have to put the work in, it won't happen automatically. But yeah, their grades should increase. If they're on an A now, that means that if they sat their GCSE paper now, they would get an A. That's pretty incredible considering they've only been doing the course for 1 term. If you could just stay muted, I'd really. So I'll just give a little example for the current attainment grade. So a student may have ended year 9 on an A grade in English. At the start of year 10, they could be working really very well, but they're required to write in a new essay style. Their first 3 extended answers maybe that they've done for English weren't very well structured because they didn't know how to yet. They weren't practiced at it. Maybe they weren't well enough focused on the answers. Because of this, they might be achieving like a grade 4. So their current attainment grade would be a grade 4. If the student were to sit an English IGCSE exam at this point, that means that they would get a grade 4. So that's their current attainment grade. However, with feedback from their essay, they should improve their future essays. So maybe by the end of year 10, they're getting a grade 6. In their year 11 mock exams, they might still be on a 6. And then by the time they do their exams at the end of year 11, you know, they might be up to a grade 7, a grade 8, a grade 9. I just want to make it really clear. I don't want anyone to panic about, you know, particularly if your child is one of these students that were in year 9, A's across the board. The criteria now has jumped up. It's much higher. So they're being measured now from the criteria for the end of year 11. Okay. Over to Mr. Malloy.
Super. All right, good evening, everyone. So yeah, my name's Dan Malloy. To introduce myself, I am the academic coordinator for year 10 and year 11. Yeah, I'm going to talk about what exactly these minimum target grades are, which are the grades that you and your child will be receiving in January for each subject. So I think, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process. And to start with, last summer, for most of our year 10s, they did an assessment or a questionnaire, if you like, in school. And that helped to generate the outcomes, their most likely outcomes for their GCSE examinations for each subject. And as you can see here from this graph, that gives you an idea of the kinds of percentages that wow, this is based on the national national picture. So for example, you can see that the percentage of students that will receive a grade 9 prediction for any given subject is slightly less than 5%. And you can see for the rest of the subjects what those percentages relatively are. At Hastings, we expect actually this graph to be even more skewed, because we want our students, we really push for our students to aim for those 6s, 7s, 8s and 9s, and those are the targets we pursue. So most of these students did this questionnaire last summer. However, if they're new to Hastings, then they will have completed this questionnaire in September when they arrived. But that was the first part of the process. And then what we do is we show these results to their class teachers, exclusively to their class teachers. And between these questionnaires and the professional opinion of the class teachers in the first term, because these teachers know your pupils, they know your children, they've seen how hard they've been working in class, they will have completed some internal assessments as well, and between the questionnaire and the professional opinion of the teacher will then set this minimum target grade. So that's the process we've gone through over the last term. And I just want to emphasize, really, I mean, you can read a couple of the examples here yourself, but I just want to emphasize two things. The first thing, well, sorry, three things. The first thing is that these really are minimum targets. So when they receive these targets in January, this is the minimum grade we would expect them to get, and this is by no means a ceiling for them. This is no means a maximum. This is their minimum target, and they can absolutely work hard to push past this target. And that's the first thing. The second thing is that we do try to make these targets aspirational, because we have high expectations of our children here at Hastings. And last but not least, you know, these are not guaranteed. And as you can see, if you read these examples, the example in the top right corner here, these minimum target grades are not a guarantee. Of course, this is what we expect your child to achieve if they work hard, and we see that they're working hard at school. If they don't work hard, then of course that's a problem. But we always want to motivate them to do the best they can. Okay, and so what's going to happen then when we come back in January is we will do a PSHE lesson. We're going to dedicate a lesson actually on the 18th of January, which I believe is the second week back after Christmas. We're going to dedicate an entire lesson to really, first of all, giving these grades to the students, and they will be given exclusively to these students. They will not share these grades with other students. It's private information for them to keep. And based on that knowledge, they will.
Maria,
Yes.
could you turn your camera off just because we're recording so that we can share it with other parents? Thank you. Okay.
No problem at all. And based on this PSHE session, they will have the opportunity to reflect on their targets and also to set their own personal targets based on what they know about themselves, based on their learner profiles, and hopefully with the idea of setting a New Year's resolutions. Coming back in January is a great time and a great opportunity to set goals for yourself. So we want to make the most of that when the students return in January. So yeah, and then that evening, the evening of the 18th of January, you will also, as parents, receive these minimum target grades. So both your child and yourselves will receive this minimum target grade on the same day for each subject. To emphasize, that's for every subject.
We have thought quite carefully about the timings of giving students these grades, because we've put a lot of work into teachers generating what we think are really meaningful minimum target grades. So we want to share them in the way that they'll have the best impact. And we thought that if we attach them to this first report that you're getting on the 22nd, potentially some of the students might be confused. They might not have had a chance to reflect. But actually, I think receiving them in January, they've had time to think about their first report grades, their current attainment grades over the holidays. And exactly as Mr. Malloy said, they can treat it as kind of New Year's resolutions and, really set themselves some positive targets using these minimum targets. Something else that you'll receive on the 18th of January is a learner profile. So this comes from that online assessment that gives a kind of statistical, this is their most likely grade outcome that the teachers can then help to use to apply their own knowledge to. And this is just an example of one. It shows, so this one is your profile shows that you have a clear preference for learning using pictures, diagrams, and other visual ways of learning rather than reading or writing. And I have to say, I think these are really interesting, and reading them for the students, I find very interesting, because sometimes they surprise me and sometimes I'm like, no, that is exactly correct for that student. And this is by no means as something that a student has to agree with. But I think it's some really interesting information that we have that actually, as you as parents, could also benefit from having. You as parents could benefit from knowing that you may lack attention to detail, so make sure you read them carefully, just because then, when you see them doing homework, you can say, have you done this? Have you tried drawing a diagram? Maybe that will help. And I think it's interesting to kind of have that moment of reflection about the different ways in which we learn, because we do all learn in different ways. This is definitely me. I'm a spatial learner. So yeah, all of this information will go home on the 18th. Okay. So the next thing we wanted to do was to give you some information about kind of our aims for assessment at Hastings, why we do assessments, the type of assessments that we do. And I will admit this is very similar to an assembly that I gave Key Stage 4 a few weeks ago. What is an assessment? Assessment is a wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure and document academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or the educational needs of students. So it has a lot of purposes. Assessment is really important. And not all assessments look like this in Google image I got called, where I just searched assessment. I think when we think of assessments, we think of tests and we think of, multiple choice, high stress situations. And actually a lot of different things that we do in class as teachers is assessing. So it might be students holding up whiteboards with some quick answers on. It could be a quick quiz online. I love those, they're my favourite. It could be some good old-fashioned, lots of writing on the page marking. It could be word fill and you just run through the answers very quickly afterwards. It can be getting students up to help them to ask them to answer questions on the board. It can be, you know, quick here, so like 1, 2, matching things together very fast. And it can be as simple as like thumbs up and thumbs down. I'm a big fan of that. You know, saying to a class, do you get this? Do you understand? Students are incredibly good at assessing themselves. Students are really good at knowing when they don't understand something and when they do. And that's something that I think that as a school we feel very passionately about, students being in control of their own learning and students needing to be able to say when they don't understand something and to ask for help. So assessment can look like lots of different things and actually is happening in almost every single lesson. But why do we do them? So we do them to identify gaps in knowledge. It might be that, you know, there's 10 key pieces of information and we have to make sure you know all of those 10 key pieces of information before you can do kind of the next harder thing. It can help students improve their understanding. It can help with knowledge retention. Knowledge is very much, you know, the building block of all of the other things. It's really difficult to answer an exam question if you don't know the knowledge, even though there are harder skills out there like evaluating and assessing. Those things are more complicated. They are difficult to do, but without that base knowledge, it's almost impossible to do them. It also encourages students to learn independently. Lots of frequent low stakes assessments really encourages students to be like, oh, maybe I won't remember that from the lesson, so I will revise it quickly at home.
Super. Yeah, and I'm just going to take the opportunity now to talk to you about the opportunities that we have in school before the pupils sit their real exams, which we know they sit their real GCSE exams, the majority of them at the end of year 11. And so we want to talk about the opportunities that we give to the students before they sit their real exams, so that they are accustomed to doing assessments in school and they feel okay with the pressure of exams and they feel okay with that environment, which we think is really important that they do so before they reach that stage. So in term 2 of year 10, which is next term after Christmas, what we aim to do is we will be having some assessments in each subject, which we call review assessments. And what they are is they are an assessment which reviews all of their knowledge that they've learnt in year 10 up until that point. Now, it depends on the department. So maths may decide to do theirs in February. English may decide to do theirs in April, for example. But each department will do one of these assessments at some point in the second term. And the idea behind this is ultimately what we're doing is we're preparing them for the mocks, and we have the pre-mocks in the final term of this year, and then we have the actual mocks in December and January of year 11, as they around this time the current year 11 are doing their mocks at the moment. They've just started this week. And so really there's 3 chances for the pupils to go through that experience of doing exams, feeling like they're real exams before they actually do the real exams. So that just gives you a flavour. It gives you an idea of our vision for this process.
So I think giving you this idea of structure about how assessments within years 10 and year 11 works, things that, you know, we would really like you to help us with is discouraging cheating, is encouraging academic honesty. If a student submits work that isn't their own, it really negates the point of those assessments, because, you know, in between each of these assessment sessions, we want the students to receive feedback and apply their feedback and get better, receive feedback, apply their feedback and get better. And we can't really do that if the work isn't their own. We'll give them the feedback, but it doesn't actually apply to that student. Teachers, you know, we don't care about how good a student is at copying and pasting. We want everyone to do the assessments from the same starting point. And also, yeah, like I said, receiving feedback from a teacher that doesn't actually apply to the piece of work because the piece of work is from the internet is frustrating for everyone. And it's a missed opportunity. So should assessments be stressful? And again, I think this is something that you can help with and should understand. So those initial term 2 assessments, the review assessments this year, they'll be very much staggered. So they won't have lots going on at the same time. That shouldn't be too stressful. I'm not saying that they won't be stressed, but it shouldn't be too stressful. But when it comes to their pre-mocks at the end of the year and then their mocks, those assessments will be more compressed together. They will have more of them. And also we really understand that assessments can be stressful. But one of the things we need students to do is to slowly build up their resilience to that stress. So some stress is good, some stress is a motivator, but too much stress obviously is not good. Students can relieve their exam stress in lots of different ways. Mr. Malloy, were you going to talk about this?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I mean, I think it's just important to emphasize because we've spoken a lot about exams today, and we also want to emphasize that we think it's equally, if not more important, to make sure that your child is feeling okay about these exams and they're not feeling too stressed. And, you know, our number one priority always is to think about their well-being. And so, you know, we want to promote these ideas within school. We think it's important that they get enough sleep, that they have healthy diets, that they don't spend enough time on their too much time on their computer screens. I always recommend that they have half an hour at least before they go to sleep where they don't look at a screen. And, you know, instead they could read a book or whatever gives them that break. Physical exercise as well is equally so important for their well-being. I'm sure you know all this already, but it's just to reassure you that we do prioritize this in school as well. And what we want to do and what we will do is during these PSHE sessions that we have in school, we will dedicate that time and at least a good proportion of that time to managing your stress, managing your time, etc., because we believe that's important in helping them with their well-being going forwards.
Yeah. The reason why I think we feel like it's so important that we have this conversation and I think discuss the stress that can be involved with assessment so openly is because actually when it comes to the IGCSE examinations, the A-level examinations for anyone who goes on to do the IB, the bulk of the IB examinations, they aren't assessed internally. So they aren't marked by Hastings teachers. I'm a geography teacher and I don't get to mark the final geography papers, although I would love to. I'm not allowed. What happens is we receive the papers before the exam date. They're kept in a sealed plastic packet in a safe, in a locked cupboard, in a locked room that only 2 people are allowed the key to. We only open them minutes before the exam and we open them in front of the students. 2 people have to be present and sign a piece of paper saying that we opened them together right then at that time. When students have finished those papers, we have to package them back off into these plastic envelopes and someone from DHL comes and picks them up. Trained examiners then mark the papers and we don't get the results until August, the same time as you. We have actually very little control over those final steps. And, you know, we don't write the exam timetable for the end of year 11. So a student could have 2 exams in a day. It's happened where a student has had 3 exams in a day because we deal with multiple exam boards. These things aren't common, but they do happen. So what we need to do because all of that is out of our control, we need to build them up and try and prepare them to be able to achieve their best. We don't want it to be a shock at the end of year 11, having to do all of these things. We want to have slowly stepped up each term, and for them to feel prepared and to feel supported and to have kind of those coping mechanisms in place to deal with their exam stress, to write exam timetables and revision timetables. So in summary, teachers have no say about when the final exams happen. Students could have 2 or 3 in a day. They have non-bank holidays. Trust us, we don't like that either. But they are very much to fit the UK timetable, and we have different bank holiday times. Teachers don't know what's going to be in the paper. You know, we have like a syllabus that gives us options. We can look at past papers, we can look at trends, but ultimately we don't know. We're not actually even allowed to look at the exam paper that the students sat until 72 hours after. It used to be 24 hours, then it was 48, and now it is 72. And yeah, and then again, just to say, like, we don't mark those papers, they get sent off, we don't get to see them. And I think it's probably worth saying as well, you know, like, the teachers get stressed about these exams. We work so hard to make our students do the best that they can do. And so, you know, we don't want them to get to that point in year 11 and then feel nervous and not do their best. That's an awful reason to not do your best. We want them to, you know, feel like they are prepared and they've done everything they can and they know what's coming. So the more assessments that we do, the more chances that students have for that feedback, the more practice they have before those end of year assessments. And I think it's really important that we see being assessed as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to evaluate where the student's at. It's an opportunity for the student to set their own targets, to know what they need to do. Because ultimately, you know, they're the ones that are sat in all the lessons. They know what they're understanding and what they're not, and they know what they're good at and what they're not. And then my final point is this one, that being wrong opens us up to the possibility of change. Being wrong opens us up for growth. It's how we learn. We learn by making mistakes. We learn by doing badly in an assessment, and then we can do better the next time. And that's really a value that we're trying to install in our students, is this focus on progress, and trying to focus a little bit less on grades and a little bit more on actually just how we do better incrementally each time. And this is very much, you know, personally in my teaching ethos, but in a lot of our teachers as well. We just want the students to do their best, and if they focus overly on individual tiny marks and things that are out of their control, that won't support their progress. What helps students to do better is focusing on what they did wrong, how they can not do it again, and how they can improve in the future. Okay, all right. Well, if we stop recording.